watching The Pulse, your weekly guide to global health on Al Jazeera. I'm Shireen Al-Feki. In today's program, we're looking at AIDS in Africa. A decade ago, AIDS was essentially a death sentence in poor countries. Now, thanks to international efforts, that's changed, at least for some. More than 2 million people in developing countries are getting anti-retroviral drugs to treat their HIV infection. But that's still only a fraction of those who need it. We begin in Zambia with a look at the difference treatment can make. Agatha Lloyd works for the World Health Organization. She pioneered the anti-retroviral program in her own country. Now she's sharing her experience with others.
I'm from Zambia, and we saved thousands of people when antiretrovirals were introduced. They do work, and it can work if all of us start talking about it and disseminating information that there is hope out there. We cannot cure, but we can give a lifeline to those who are infected.
I'm a fighter, and I'll fight until the cure is found.
You know, here in Zambia, where nearly each and every house has a problem. It's either they're infected or they are affected. Day in, day out, we have funerals, you know, people dying with HIV.
Charity is HIV positive. She's a single mom looking after 4 children. Charity nearly died from AIDS. At the height of her illness, she weighed half of what she weighs now. These pills saved her life. They're antiretrovirals, or ARVs. They won't cure her, but without these 2 pills a day, she'd be dead, and her children motherless. Today, she's remarkably healthy.
My children started asking me to say, "Mommy, can this be HIV/AIDS?" Even when I'm passing by the road, people would start, you know, sort of gossip to say, "Is this woman HIV positive?" You know, they usually use our language here to say "kanayaka," means it has been lit, you know, like fire, you know, kanayaka. But today, the same people, when they see me, they say, "Is it true that you're HIV positive, or maybe you are just sick of something else?" I tell them I'm still HIV positive.
Antiretroviral drugs are drugs which stop the replication of the HIV virus. What it means is it stops it from multiplying, increasing in its numbers. In essence, what it does is it stops or acts like a lead, like this. It stops the virus from multiplying. So it's very important to take it every day for the rest of your life to stop the virus from escaping there.
It's breakfast time in Lusaka, Zambia. Charity's husband walked out on her when she was diagnosed with AIDS, so she has to support the whole family with her salary as a nurse at a local clinic. If that weren't enough financial strain, Charity's niece moved in after her mother died of AIDS.
Oh, wait for the side plate from Alex. He's going to bring it for you. You can get some and then you get bread.
It's a heavy load, but with treatment, Charity can keep the family going.
I feel very nice, but some people, they think that my mother, she hasn't got the virus still. Some of my friends who saw her when she was sick, they still know that there was a time she was sick and now here she is. So to me, I'm very proud of her.
Okay, is he going to be coming to Mr. Mara's?
Charity often talks to her children about HIV. Soon she will take them to be tested. It's a daunting prospect and not something she undertakes lightly. But with treatment now available, testing is no longer a death sentence. Charity gives thanks at her local church. She's one of the lucky ones who has access to ARVs. But at least 4 million AIDS patients are still waiting for treatment. They're praying for Charity's kind of miracle. Joining me to discuss the challenges of rolling out HIV treatment is Harold Jaffe, who's a specialist in global public health at the University of Oxford. Harold, so much money, so much effort, so much talk about getting millions of people on ARVs. There's been progress, but why are so many people still waiting?
I think the answer depends on how you're looking at the question. All of this has happened in just the last 3 or 4 years. So about 2 million people have been put on treatment, which to me is quite impressive. The real issue is how do we put everybody else on treatment who's going to need it? And there the issue isn't simply the cost of the drugs, but it's the whole infrastructure to administer them, having proper clinics, staff that are trained to give the drugs, laboratory support, and so on. So that kind of thing just can't happen overnight.
When you say staff as well, it's also being able to retain the people that you need to actually deliver the goods as well. I mean, there's a big problem about brain drain in affected countries, too.
I think the recognition is that a whole different model is going to be needed for anti-retroviral therapy for AIDS, and that a lot more responsibility will have to be given to nurses and clinic assistants to take care of routine patients, because there will never be enough doctors in these countries to do physician-directed therapy.
But even retaining nurses is a problem in many countries.
It is. I mean, many of the nurses in the UK came from sub-Saharan Africa, from countries like Uganda and Nigeria, so that poses special challenges as well.
Harold, are you concerned about the sustainability of some of these programs? There's a lot of talk from donors wanting to give money to start ARV treatment, but what about being able to continue people on ARVs for 10, 15 years? Is that a concern of yours?
I think sustainability is the critical issue, and it's one that people have been reluctant to address. There are a couple parts to the question there. One is that if persons continue to get infected, then the need for treatment will continue to go up, and it's not clear we can keep up with it. Secondly, because treatment is not curative, anyone who started on treatment, at least the current treatments, will have to stay on it the rest of his or her life. So there's a major commitment to do that. If you stop treatment, people will simply progress.
Do you see that sort of forward thinking amongst donors?
I think people talk about this off the record, but it's such a difficult question that there's a reluctance to discuss it publicly. I think the real issue is, what are international health priorities going to be in the future? I mean, what if priorities do change? What if this money dries up? How many of the countries that currently get it will be able to pick up the cost themselves?
Because putting people on ARVs is not a one-shot wonder. This is not like a vaccination campaign. Once you start people on treatment, you have to keep them on treatment.
That's right.
Of course, when you keep them on treatment, there is the additional question of resistance. The longer they're being treated, the greater the chance of resistance. Second-line drugs are actually quite expensive. Has any provision, any forward thinking been done on that, how we're going to get these more expensive drugs to poor people?
Well, it's certainly true that over time we will see resistance. For example, in the United States right now, about 15% of newly infected people have resistant virus. So we will need second or even third line treatment. Right now that's much more expensive than what's currently available in the developing world. Only one of the drugs that are called protease inhibitors that would be used in the second line are available generically, and the price there is actually fairly high. So when we get to the point that those drugs are needed, there's going to be an urgent requirement that the price drop, either through generic manufacturing or through changes in pricing from the major manufacturers.
Now, Harold, there have been concerns about rolling out ARVs in that some critics have said, well, the emphasis on treatment is actually detracting from prevention, from testing, that it's not really acting as a sort of coherent whole rolling out the fight against AIDS. What's your thinking on that?
We need both treatment and prevention. It shouldn't be either or. The people who are being put on treatment now are people who would die without it, so there's no question about the need there. But the other part of the equation is that if persons continue to get infected at the rates they are now, they also will need treatment and ultimately exceed the capacity. So we have to do both.
But are you seeing that joined up thinking on the ground?
Certainly in a lot of the funding, there is provision for both. For example, the U.S. President's initiative does include funding for both treatment and prevention programs.
Now, Harold, there was a target set of getting 3 million people on antiretrovirals by 2005. That came and that went. And now there is this pledge for universal access to antiretrovirals by 2010. Is that a realistic prospect?
I think one has to look at these numbers more as slogans than necessarily realistic goals. I don't think it's bad to have a slogan. It focuses people on the need. But at the same time, I think many of these targets are numbers that we probably won't be able to achieve.
Well, on that note, thank you, Harold.
You're welcome.
Coming up after the break, we go to the heart of one of Latin America's worst diseases.